Coming on here and doing these reviews, guys, sometimes it's kind of tough. I won't even lie to you guys because... What's going on? Troll Pal CHH here. Today we're talking about a new 4K release from Scream Factory, and that release is Land of the Dead. Now, there's kind of a premise for this review, and the premise is, when should you upgrade to 4K? Because sometimes the answer, when you're trying to answer it for people, it's not a black and white thing. And we're going to get into that with this video, but let's talk a little bit about this movie. My favorite director of all time, guys, is George Romero. So I am going to admit to you right up front, you're talking to somebody that is a bona fide fanboy. He's my favorite director. I love the person. I love his movies. Romero's my all-time favorite. Land of the Dead is a movie that's doesn't have a great reception. I wouldn't say it has a negative reception. I think if you polled people about Romero's post-perfect trilogy, if you will, his Dawn, Night, and Day movies, I think if you were to ask people what's the better one past that, I think the majority would probably say, well, Land is okay, and then I don't like Survival or Diary. You might get the few that will say, I like Diary more than Land, which I do love Diary of the Dead, probably a little bit more than Land. But my point is, you know, it's a movie that's got a mid-grade reputation, a mid-grade, response from people. And I understand that. You got to think about what's going on during this time, guys. This movie came out, I believe it was 2005. Yeah. So Romero was getting his, going back to his roots, so to speak, because what's going on at the time, just a year before, was the big remake for Dawn of the Dead that Zack Snyder did. And that movie really, I think, when you watch Land of the Dead and then you watch Dawn of the Dead 04, you can see the differences in the way George made movies for people, and then also you can see the difference in the way movies were really strived to be made for people of that day. Zack Snyder's movie feels like a Corvette going 100 miles an hour the entire movie, whereas Land of the Dead feels like, you know, cruising down a golf cart on a golf course, that kind of speed. It's not a bad thing, but man, it's different. And I do wonder if people, they were getting accustomed to the way movies were really starting to feel and the speed of movies at that time. George, to him, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, I feel, in his movies. And, you know, that's a personal taste thing, whether you can decide whether you like that or not. But for me, I love the way George's movies feel. I don't know, if most of you guys get to know me through my videos or have watched me for a long time, you can tell I'm a guy that runs on a low frequency. I'm pretty chill. Now, I can get animated and get worked up, but on average, when you talk to me, if you ever meet me or whatever, like, I am a low tempo guy. I'm a very chill person. I don't get worked up. And so, like, I really relate to the pacing of the way George does his movies. And that's what Land does. So, you know, Land is actually a movie that, watching it again on 4K for this review, I was taken aback at the scope of Land. Land feels like possibly the biggest movie production-wise out of all of the Dead movies. There are, God, I don't know how many extras as zombies. The world that we're in with this, with John Leguizamo, and also seeing Dennis Hopper in here, which is great. We've got bigger names in these movies at this point, and also just like the atmosphere of everything, it seems so big. We see big buildings. We're driving through towns where there's loads of zombies. It just feels like such a bigger production, which I actually liked more this time watching it as opposed to in the past. In the past, it was just like, well, this is not good as day. This is not as good as night. This is not as good as dawn. But I think as time goes on for people, and you can go back and watch these movies, now there's a chance you could go back and watch these and say, it still doesn't cut it for me. But for me, I've been going through my own personal renaissance with 2000s. As I'm recording this, there is a spinner shelf right behind the computer that is filled with nothing but 2000s horror DVDs. And I'm going back and I'm like, man, this was actually an interesting time for movies because it was a renegade era. You had movies that went a million miles an hour. You had movies that felt more story-driven and a little bit slower. You had the gore movies. You had all this. And Land it's so unequivocally a George Romero film at a time where, you know, movies were changing. The speed of movies were changing. There was that sort of thing. So I look back at Land as true. It feels like a classic movie to me. And there are things about it that I like. You've got your zombies that obviously have the identity for the movie. Like in this one, it's the garage worker guy who's on the cover of... he's actually on the cover of the Blu-ray release of this and everything, and he's great. Here's my one gripe about Land of the Dead, I will say. I like the characters of this. I wouldn't say that Land has as iconic character. Like, I like John Leguizamo in this movie, don't get me wrong. I really do, but, like, this movie lacks a few things. Land of the Dead lacks moments of purely memorable dialogue. Stuff we would hear from Dawn or Night, especially Night, or even Day. Like, I can't rattle off cool lines from Land, which is something I wish it had. You know, I would have liked that. And the other thing I don't like about Land, I totally understand why George was doing this in terms of progression. You don't want to repeat yourself in too many ways, and you also want to show how things evolve and change, is I feel like some of the zombies are just getting a little too smart. Like, they shoot guns and things like that in this movie, and for me, I think you know, the power and numbers game still works. Like, to me, it's like, it's not broke, don't fix it. I think when you have just this barrage of zombies in areas, like, that is enough still. Those couple things are things that I think are either lacking or go too far, and they're not necessary. But I love the theme. I love what George is subliminally trying to talk about in here, which is basically classism and how, you know, it's almost like they live a little bit. And if you watch the movie in some sort of metaphorical way, which I really like, you know, there's the high class people like Dennis Hopper and all them, and they're living like everything's normal. But for the working class people, for all the people that are out there that are either alive or dead, it's just like, all of them are really zombies just living in crap. So I always like George's subliminal. It's never stuff he shoves down your throat. He uses that premise as a vehicle to make a movie through horror and through zombies. Is it a great movie? You know, I think it can be over time even more. I think the Romero fans would love it, but I think for people that haven't seen this one in a while, I think the scope of the movie is something to applaud. It feels like a big movie, and visually it's great. Now, let's talk about the actual picture quality on this and the features on this, because this is what the theme of this video is really going to be about. And before I do just that, guys, let me cut myself off, because I want to discuss the cuts on this release, which is interesting, which I don't think will be a problem for most people, but you never know, and that's fair as well. Obviously, having the unrated version is really the way to go with all the gore and effects that are done on this. And we have the 4K on the Disc 1 unrated version. We don't have a 4K of the theatrical version on a 4K disc. But what we do have, as you can see, is Disc 2 is a 4K scan on the Blu-ray of the unrated version. And the theatrical version, we do have the 4K restoration, but that's on a Blu-ray disc. All right, guys, so the old Blu-ray release, I popped this on to watch it. This is not a bad-looking Blu-ray. This was taken from the Inter-negative, which is obviously just not the negative. It looks good. I think for some people, and maybe for a number of people, this would probably be good enough. But for me, while it looks good, it still has that flat look, that HD flat look, which is something that for a lot of movies, like, it is what it is, but it's got that flat look. It's crisp, but it's flat looking. And this is where the 4K comes in. And I'll show you guys the other slipcover while we're doing this, because I'm such a Romero fan. You're damn right. You can probably see the poster back there. Yeah, I pre-ordered this thing. So this is the alternate poster, which is nice. You know, you got that. But again, you guys know I'm not a fan of double slipcovers. But the fact is, I really wanted it for that poster, because I've always wanted that Land poster. So the 4K for this was obviously taken from the negative, a 4K restoration. The 4K for this is very reminiscent in the terms of the quality of what the actual Dawn of the Dead 04 4K was, which was a great 4K. I've been on record saying that is a sensational 4K. That's a 10 out of 10 4K. Just floored at how good it looks. Land, here's the thing about Land. There are things it does extremely well. Extremely well. It's not a movie that's blasting in terms of just like color, because Land is a very dark movie. But whenever you see the zombies bite, take off body parts, rip off skin, the blood looks truly remarkable on the 4K. Sharpness on this is sensational, and that flatness is completely gone. You can look at the image and you can see the depth of everything, and it truly looks uncompressed. So the picture quality for this release, I would give it like a 6.8, 6.9 out of 10. This one, I would give a 9.5 out of 10 with a caveat. So here's the thing about this. It looks, I mean, it's just a great way to watch the movie. I mean, I was grinning ear to ear watching this 4K because of how good it looked. But in the opening of the movie and a few scenes throughout, mostly in the opening, these scenes are dark. So they're dark scenes. And while the sharpness and the beauty of the image is there, if you watch this in a brightly lit room, it will be a little irritating, feeling like you're not seeing things that well. You turn the lights off. That's the best way to experience this, because if you do that, it's fine. It's not necessarily an issue of like the Friday the 13th 4K where the movie's just like, it's dark, right? But there are those moments in the beginning. If you watch this movie in a darkly lit room, it's not an issue, but keep that in mind. That's what I will say. In terms of the audio, so we actually got a Dolby audio soundbar. It's a longer soundbar we put in there, and this has Dolby audio. So the audio improvement over this one to the last one was, that's where I'm going to see a real big jump. It was great. There are moments, and the audio was so robust, and there are moments of hearing the big tanks drive through, and you know, my speakers kind of point like not just straight, but they kind of angle, and you get the sensation of the trucks going through the room. You can hear it going, the gunshots as well. The audio on this was like a really great way to see a bigger improvement for sure. And that's something I really need to go back and watch some other releases to see how much more of an audio difference I can notice. But here's the thing. So the picture quality is sensational. With just those few caveats I talked about, the audio quality is a big improvement over this release. But here's the reason I say, when should you upgrade? In terms of features, they did a great job with this. They got new cast interviews, including John Leguizamo, and we'll look at the back of these right now with a side-by-side comparison. Obviously, everything is ported over on here, but in terms of new stuff, I don't believe that there really was anything new. And I understand how it could be hard to do that. In actuality, they pretty much did a lot of stuff for the previous release. What more could they have added? Like interview John Leguizamo again? You could say that, sure, but this is one of those instances where I say it's not a black and white thing. So I upgraded this because I'm obviously a George Romero super fan. I love his movies, and I get pleasure out of upgrading these titles and watching these movies on 4K that I never thought I'd be able to see. So for me, the picture quality makes me feel good about this and happy about this. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try to just convince you to get it. My point is, here's what I'm saying. How often would you watch Land of the Dead? How often are you going to watch Land of the Dead? Are you a fan of the movie? Maybe you could watch your old Blu-ray release if you have this, or watch your DVD release and see if you enjoy the movie a little bit more. And if you do, then think to yourself, well, you know what? Like, yeah, I'm starting to kind of change my mind. I kind of like this movie a little bit more now. I would like to see this movie upscaled. If you don't own the Scream Factory release at all, then I would definitely say I think there's plenty of meat on the bone of this release, albeit that some of the features are ported over from their older release. But this is a well done release. Especially if you don't own it at all, Land of the Dead, it's great. But in terms of upgrading from the Scream Factory Blu-ray, if you have this, you need to go back and watch the movie again. You need to go back and see if you think you agree or disagree with my perception on the picture quality, where it's nice and sharp, but it just looks flat, and I don't want that from movies I watch often, especially these horror titles. So that's just something you have to watch it again, come to your own basis, and come to your own conclusion on what you think you should do. And that sort of thing. You know, it's not necessarily coming on here and doing these reviews, guys. Sometimes it's kind of tough. I won't even lie to you guys, because it's not like I get money if people buy these releases off of a review I do. Like, no, I buy these releases myself. Clearly, I've got the poster right there. But it's hard, right? Like, sometimes it's not a black and white answer to give to the audience. Yes, upgrade this. No, don't upgrade this. It depends on your situation. I need to know more about what you have, if you have this release, if you're happy with the way this looks, that sort of things. If you don't watch it that often, so you don't feel it's justified, that sort of thing. So it's not necessarily that I have the answer. I'm just giving you my perception on the release, the picture quality, which I do think is substantial over this release, but that's about it, and I don't think that's good enough for some people. So that's what I'm getting at. I don't want to start rambling on here, guys, but I think that this movie is going to build a better reputation over time, especially with people going back and revisiting it. The scope of the movie is the biggest out of all of them, it feels like. Maybe not Dawn, but pretty close. But yeah, just I'm starting to like this movie more and more as I get older. So, yeah, long live George Romero, guys. Let me know your thoughts on that. Let me know what your thresholds are for upgrading. That's really the big question with this kind of video. So there it is, guys. Thank you guys for watching, and like I said, long live George. We love you, man. Huge giant thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you guys, this would not be possible. To get behind the scenes photos, videos, music, private live streams, and much more, you can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Thank you to my patrons.